Hello, leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host for this podcast, having the honor to be joined today by Susan Silbermann. Susan is currently board member and director of several companies, including Hillvax, Yavi, and DNBio. After more than 30 years at Pfizer, starting as a summer intern and retiring as global president of emerging markets, Susan has led and been responsible for more than 10,000 colleagues at Pfizer across over 100 countries, inclusive of Pfizer's vaccines business. Susan created and drove Pfizer's internal COVID-19 task force, ensuring global colleague safety and business continuity. Prior to this, she was the first global president of Pfizer Vaccines, expanding the portfolio from one product to many, from internally developed to externally sourced. She held positions in marketing, general management, business, and commercial development in the US and outside the US. She also led numerous initiatives in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Susan, I am so honored to have you with me today.
Thanks, Naji. It's really great to be here with you.
First, can you share with us your story from your dream of being a veterinarian, traveling the world and speaking French, to an inspiring, successful leader in the pharmaceutical industry? What's in between the line of this incredible journey?
Well, thanks, Naji, for allowing me to join this group of really incredible leaders that you've interviewed after you started this wonderful podcast about leadership and what I think is a really unique concept of spreading love. My journey probably started at a very young age, sitting at a dinner table when I was a kid growing up and having not just one, but two parents who worked outside the home. I realized early on was something quite unusual where I grew up in Baltimore as a young two siblings, my sister and I, in a household where both my parents left in the morning to go to work. And my sister and I, of course, went to school. And when I was a kid, my grandmother lived with us until she passed away when I was 10. So that was the person that was home when we got home from school. And my mother came home and my grandmother had started dinner, but when my grandmother passed away, I started dinner. And I realized that, it was possible for both parents to work outside the home. And my mother was very proud of being a working mom. Most of my friends' moms pick their kids up after school. And I realized that you could be a woman and a partner or a wife or a mother and also work outside the home. And I developed, like most young girls do, a love of pets and animals. We had dogs growing up. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I worked at the small animal vet. I worked at the zoo in Washington when I was in high school and then in college. I worked at the New England Aquarium when I went to college in Boston. And I really thought I was going to go to veterinary school until I fell in love with science, and I fell in love with languages, and I fell in love with traveling. And I spoke to a professor who said, you could go to veterinary school, but you could also do something different with your life and go to Europe for a year and try something different and see what you like. And I did, but I decided I was going to apply to veterinary school, and I applied and I didn't get in. And I thought that was a sign that maybe I needed to rethink what I was doing. The admissions officer at the University of Virginia Veterinary School said, "You have great grades. You're really smart. I'm sure that if you go and work on a farm for a year, you'd be able to compete with all the kids that grow up on farms." And at that point, I had worked at the New England Aquarium, the National Zoo in Washington, a number of small animal vets. And I thought, wow, I guess you have to be a veterinarian to be able to get into veterinary school. So I decided it was time for me to think about doing something else. So I decided to marry my love of science and my love of travel and international things and think about something else, and worked for a few years in Washington, D.C. for a consulting firm, applied to business school, ended up going to school in New York City. And obviously the surrounding area, there were a lot of pharma companies. Applied for a summer internship at a company called Pfizer that at the time nobody knew who they were or even how to spell the name of the company. And lo and behold, I got a summer internship there and ended up never leaving. So sort of started as a why not, and it ended up as why leave. that's the story, Naj. That's how it started, and that's where it ended.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, Susan, the story. I loved your 6-word story also that I saw featured on your profile. And I want to start with the last 2 words actually for today. As our podcast, as you said, it's all about this. So your words are inspiring leader. These are obviously 2 words that define you, but I'd love if you can share with us, what does inspiring leadership mean for you?
I think one of the things I've always felt about being a leader was you want people to be able to look at you in a way that makes them realize that they don't necessarily want to be exactly who you are, but they want to learn from you about how you do what you do. I've always believed that the how is as important as the what. And inspiring people means you want them to watch not just what you're doing, but how you do it and how you get it done. And there's a quote I like to use a lot, which is a quote. Actually, I was talking to someone just the other day about this quote, and it's a quote by from a poem by Maya Angelou, and it goes something like this, which is, "They'll forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." And I don't know if I have every word exactly right, so my apologies to Ms. Angelou if I have it wrong, but it's the concept that people won't exactly remember the memo you wrote. They won't exactly remember where you were or what you were wearing, but they will remember how they felt when they left the room they were in with you. They'll remember when they went home that day, what it was that they told their family or their friends or their loved ones about the conversation that they had. And I feel like inspiring leaders means you're going to leave an impression on someone that they won't forget, because it's how you made them feel deep inside, whether it was a conversation about something that went well, or frankly, a conversation about something that didn't go so well. Because in the end, the goal of being a good leader isn't to make someone feel good or bad, it's to make them feel valued. It's to make them feel like they've learned something out of that interaction. And that learning is something that's going to make them be better at what they do the next time they do it, whether they've done a great job or they've maybe not done such a great job. So I always tried to focus on how I made someone feel. And that probably leads me to another point that I always have felt very strongly about. And I guess I learned this early on from my parents. My mother worked in a department store and always worked for a much larger group of men. My father ran his own small engineering firm, not always terribly successfully, but he was never someone that felt like he could work in a larger organization. And I obviously spent my entire career working in a much larger organization. Neither of them impressed upon me that your goal was to work for other people. Your goal was always to work with other people. And I always felt strongly that I wanted people to feel like they were working with me, not working for me. It's why I have a little bit of a of a hard time, especially as today we're celebrating Juneteenth. I have a hard time with the concept of servant leadership. I understand the concept of it because it's the idea that you're serving the people that are working with you. But I bristle at the word because I feel very strongly about the concept that our job is really, as leaders, to make the people that are working with us, not for us. I just don't like the concept of anyone working for someone else. I feel like there's a fundamental change that's needed in the area of work. I get it. If you're in the army, you are commanding troops. And there is something to be said for commanding situations. And I've done crisis management, and there are times when you must tell people what to do. If you are a fireman or you're an emergency room doctor, you must tell people what to do. There is a life and death situation on the line. In business, it is rarely a life and death situation. You rarely have to raise your voice and tell someone what to do. You are not pulling people out of a burning building. So I always have felt like inspiring leadership is encouraging people to do things in such a way that they find that right path, and you help them, guide them on the path. And the only way you can do that as a leader is if you've been guided yourself. You're not born knowing the path. Someone helps you find the path. And you learn that sometimes the hard way. There are people that show you the wrong way. There are people that tell you how not to get it done. But I really do believe that you inspire people to find the right way. And it's probably in all of us, the right way to get something done. You just have to have someone that helps you uncover it.
That is so powerful, Suzanne. And I love so many of words of what you shared. The with rather than for, I always struggle with it too. So I really loved it. And, you made me reflect about servant leadership. I think I'm going to change this word. I'm not going to use it anymore. I talk about caring and loving leaders. And yeah, it's servant leadership is a concept, as you know, that have been used, but I think it's really an amazing reflection you brought here about it. You talked about this caring culture when you're building, and specifically the how you lead. And there's always this balance, and you touched a little bit about this. It's not only about saying good things. Sometimes there are hard things to say. So you've led large organization in obviously challenges with the pressure that sometimes you have. I'd love to hear how you balance this care, this how on, caring about people and making sure that the execution is there. Many times we put them kind of in opposition. Well, I believe they are at the opposite, combined to that, which make people really successful. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, I do think that there's something to be said for being able to deliver a difficult message without being harsh, without being nasty. Maybe that's the word that I would look for. And it's challenging. I don't want to admit to being an expert at it. It's never pleasant to have an unpleasant conversation. It's never pleasant to have to tell someone they haven't made their numbers for the quarter. It's never pleasant to hear that you haven't made your own numbers for the quarter. It's never pleasant to go into a meeting knowing that you haven't achieved your goal for the week, the month, the year. And it's never pleasant to have to understand that someone is really not in the right job. I've had to, in my career, tell people that it's just not working out. They're not the right fit for that role. They thought they were. Maybe I put them in the job. Maybe someone else put them in the job. Maybe the job changed. Maybe the skills that were needed for the job when they started in the job are not the skills that are needed now to move things forward. I think that does happen in organizations. I think organizations needs change. I think businesses needs change. Certainly environments change. I mean, I've heard many people go move to a country and the entire environment switches, and they don't have the skills that are needed to get the organization they may have gotten them from point A to point B, but they can't get them from point B to point C. That's not the fault of the person. That's just a change in the organization. And if they aren't prepared, if they don't have the skill set, if you move to a country and you need to speak French and all of a sudden the national language becomes German, either you're a whiz and you learn German overnight, or you need to hire someone that speaks German. So I think you need to be able to explain to someone that they're just not the right person for the role, or they thought they had the skills and they don't have them anymore. Now, sometimes there's another role for them within the organization. That's great. Sometimes you need to explain to people that the world is a large place. I've used this metaphor a lot of times. There's a big world out there with lots of opportunities. And oftentimes organizations, and I know certainly Pfizer is one of those organizations, that prepares you very well for jobs in many other parts of the pharmaceutical or biotech industry or other parts of healthcare or even beyond. It's a great calling card. You work for a company like Pfizer, like many healthcare companies out there, you're set to find a job somewhere else. The job market usually, not always, there goes through ups and downs in business cycles. There are always jobs available out there. It's not easy, but very rarely are people left without anything on their resume to go and find something else. So I think it's the way you have the conversation. It's the way you help prepare people for it. It's the way you also tell people that, a job is just that. It's a job. It's not the most important thing in your life. I think that's something that perhaps as leaders and as individuals, we probably need to spend a little bit more time. I can tell you that as someone that left my job about a little over a year ago now, you reflect a lot on how much your job was your anchor and how much everything else revolved around your job and the time that you took for your job and your team and your work, and how much you thought about your job and how important it was to you, and how much everything else, whether it's your friends, your family, your other responsibilities, took second, third, fourth place. And you realize how you reorganize your priorities. And I think as we realize how important our job is, we also realize how challenging those conversations become when you have a difficult conversation to have with someone at work, because it is such an important anchor in someone's life. And when you're giving them difficult news to hear, something hasn't gone well, maybe they're not losing their job, maybe it's just a difficult year, they haven't quite hit their goals. It's the central piece of most people's lives. And you realize everything you say about it that might be slightly critical has to be delivered in a way that people learn from it and they grow from it, because it is an important part of their lives. And I think only with the distance that I have right now do I realize that I probably could have even done a better job sometimes delivering difficult news, because it was such a central part of someone's life that I was talking about. So I probably, in retrospect, I probably think about situations where I could have done even better.
Oh, Suzanne, this is, again, an example of humility and what you're sharing here. And you touched on two large responsibilities, I think, for us as leaders, right? You said sometimes we give those jobs and then things change. So we have a part of responsibility, and I totally agree with you on telling people and also making sure that we're, as you said, making them learn about this interaction and what they can take with it. So this is really powerful one. And the other one, I loved how you framed it, the responsibility I feel for us to grow people within the organization, but also for them to be outside and be able to be, to get a job in another organization if it's needed. I want to touch on something you shared about your reflection now on your job, and you said it took a central piece. Would you change anything about it now that you look back on how you defined your job within your life?
It's that's a really big question, Naji. I think I spoke to a lot of people before I decided it was time for me to move to the next chapter of my professional career and join a few smaller company boards and continue to build my board, what they call your board portfolio. So I'm still looking to join perhaps another company or two on the board side. But I have to say that there's no magic formula towards when is it time to go, what's the right decision, what's the right trigger point. It's a very unusual time in the business world right now, with the pandemic still ongoing, question mark, with the business world still changing. I still have many colleagues, former colleagues and connections in the business world where I don't know if we're back to the future, back to normal, pre-pandemic. Is the pandemic over? People are beginning to travel again. They haven't really returned to the office. There's so many questions that are still being answered. And it's just a different rhythm to everyone's day. People started new jobs. I hired people right before the pandemic really set in and people sort of left the office that have now already changed jobs. It's very unusual. So would I do anything differently? I don't think so. I'm not a big believer in looking backwards. I have to say that. Maybe that's part of who I am. Um, I think it's not a very fulfilling life to live with a lot of regrets. It's much more important to look forward, I think. I think you learn from your past, but you have a lot more fun looking forward. And so I'm not a big believer in a life of regrets. I'm much more a believer in a life of forward looking. Even if you trip and fall, I'd rather fall flat on my face than hit the back of my head. So I'm pretty excited about the unknown and much more curious. I'm a much more curious person about the unknown than looking over my shoulder.
You talked about the pandemic. Now, you obviously led a vaccine unit. You've led also, as we said and created the COVID task force at Pfizer. What is your one leadership learning during that time?
I think the biggest thing about crisis management, which is really the task force that I started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, is you really have to know what you don't know. And I think that comes from a trait of true humility. And to know what you don't know means you have to be willing to ask a lot of questions. And to be willing to ask a lot of questions, it means you have to have a really great network of people that will pick up the phone when you call. So I happen to, and this probably comes from being someone that was at the company for a very long time, that spent many years doing many different things in different parts of the company, that I suppose left a very good taste in people's mouths in every interaction I ever had. And so I was able to call people all over the place and ask all sorts of questions, and no one ever refused my phone call. So I think knowing what you don't know during a crisis allows you to get answers to questions as quickly as you possibly can, and then make some really good determinations as quickly as possible.
It touches also to two other words that you said define you, which is perpetual student, I imagine. How do you ensure curiosity really never stops, even when being at the top of a large organization, when people many times expect you to know and decide rather than what you learn?
Well, I do think that even when you're at the top of an organization, even when you have a large number of people who look up to you, if you will, and that work with you on a daily basis, for the most part, it's really important for you to be open to new ideas and to new areas of the business world, the scientific world, in the space of healthcare and R&D. When you're learning about new parts of the world, if you will, especially in emerging markets, and emerging really does mean that things are changing all the time. And so you have the ability, again, I think I'll go back to my curiosity as well. You have the ability to ask questions. One of my very last business trip before the world sort of shut down, I finally got to one of the world's most populous countries where I was convinced there was a growing innovative pharmaceutical market, and that's Indonesia. It's hundreds of millions of people that are really in need of high quality innovative healthcare. And there's a lot of healthcare innovation going on in Indonesia, a tremendous amount of healthcare innovation going on. And in terms of healthcare delivery, healthcare technology, all sorts of things. And I really felt like I was a student all over again. Met with a lot of entrepreneurs, small companies, government officials, all sorts of interesting things. And I never felt like I was asking a question that anyone was embarrassed to answer, or I felt like I should have known the answer. I felt like people were thrilled to have the conversations. So I really feel like if you ask the questions in the right way, if you're a perpetual student in the way that people understand you're looking for the answer to the question because you want to move the ball forward, you're not asking the question just because you're asking the question because you really want to do something with the answer to the question, then I think you'll have an audience that really wants to have a conversation with.
I want now to give you one word, and I'd love to reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is leadership.
Inspiration. It's really all about inspiration. It's about showing people that they can achieve something, not because you're smarter than they are, but because perhaps you've walked the path 5 minutes before they're going to get there. And you may have shown them a way to get there that might be the way they want to go, or you've shown them a way that might be the way they don't want to go.
Global citizen.
First word that comes to mind is inclusion. That don't assume that the way you see the world is the way someone else sees the world. Take advantage of the fact that there are so many different points of view, that if you have the privilege of being able to understand someone else's point of view, take advantage of it.
Belonging.
Privilege. If you, again, have the ability to be a part of something that's bigger than the world that you were raised in, and that you can create a sense of community in that, it's the greatest feeling in the world. I think belonging is a big piece of team. It's a big piece of culture. It's a big piece of why people want to work with you. And I would argue the word that I don't like to use, but it's a reason that people want to work for you. It's a reason you create followership, because you create a sense of belonging, something greater than you yourself.
Spread love in organizations.
It's truly the sense of creating a purpose and a mission and a reason that even on a gray, cold, rainy day, even when the meeting starts, when you're working from home and the call starts at 6 a.m. so that you can get everyone from every time zone around the world together, even if somebody's always in their pajamas, you've created that sense of desire to be together, so that people actually want to be with each other despite the challenge that somebody always has. You know, when I was running emerging markets, no matter when we picked a time, like I always said, someone was always in their pajamas. Whether we were in an office or we were all in our home offices, someone was always in their pajamas. If that's not spreading love, I don't know what is.
Any final word of wisdom, Susan, for healthcare leaders and specifically pharma leaders across the world?
Naji, what I would say is that choosing to be in healthcare is a truly noble choice from a business perspective. And I'm a big believer that healthcare is a business, but it's a business that probably does more good in the world than so many other businesses. And that choosing to be a leader in healthcare means choosing to continue to do more good in the world now with more technological and scientific advantages and advances and innovation than anyone could have dreamed of 30 years ago. The good news is, I think we can accelerate those advances and get them into the hands and the heads and the arms of more people than ever before at a speed that's unprecedented. Just thinking about things like drones and seeing it with my own eyes, the delivery of much needed blood in the middle of nowhere in Africa in a matter of minutes, just makes me think, what will it be like in 10 years? No less what it was 10 years ago. So I would just love your podcast to continue to encourage leaders to think about what they can do to inspire younger leaders to continue to push to bring some of that more innovation, more advances, more care, more inspiration into healthcare and into the advances to get more high quality, low cost healthcare to more corners of our world as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's such powerful words. This is, why I wake up every morning. We have such a noble purpose in this industry. We make life better for people, and we have to balance this in patients with genuine and obvious care for our people and the patients we serve. Thank you again for being with me today. It was such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Naji. It was lovely to meet you, and thank you all. And good luck with your podcast. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organization podcast. Drop us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Connect with us on SpreadLoveIO.com or on LinkedIn. Most importantly, spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.